ready to dive into something huge. Today, we're tackling the Sahara Desert. But forget those images of endless sand dunes, the one from Apollo 17. There's so much more to uncover.
Absolutely, that iconic photo barely scratches the surface.
Right, because, the Sahara is massive larger than the entire continental U.S., but it's far from just a barren wasteland.
It's actually way more dynamic than people realize. For starters, it hasn't always been a desert.
Wait, are you telling me there was a time when the Sahara wasn't a scorching sea of sand?
You better believe it. But before we dive into the Sahara's dramatic past, let's get a sense of scale. This place is colossal, a mind-boggling 9,200,000 square kilometers. That makes it the third largest desert on Earth.
Wow, the greatest desert indeed. And speaking of vastness, it's not just one country we're talking about here, is it?
Oh no, the Sahara sprawls across so many nations: Algeria, Chad, Egypt, Libya, just to name a few.
Like a giant geographical puzzle piece.
Right.
But I have to ask, it's not all sand, is it?
Not even close. We've got towering mountain ranges, some even volcanic, like the Hagar Mountains.
Volcanoes in the desert. That's a mental image I wasn't expecting.
Right. Then there are the Hamada's vast, rocky plateaus that seem to stretch on forever. And of course, we can't forget the ergs.
Ah, yes, those classic sand dunes you always see in photos.
Exactly. Some of those dunes can reach a staggering 180 meters high.
180 meters. That's like, what, 5 football fields of sand piled on top of each other?
It's a truly awe-inspiring sight.
All right, so we've established the Sahara is huge and surprisingly diverse. But you mentioned something about it not always being a desert. This green Sahara idea is blowing my mind.
I know, right? Imagine this. The Sahara, not as a desolate desert, but a lush savanna grassland teeming with life.
It's hard to even picture.
But it's true. It all comes down to something called Earth's axial precession. Essentially, our planet wobbles a bit on its axis like a spinning top on a 20,000-year cycle.
Okay, I vaguely remember that from science class. It's something to do with why we have seasons.
Right, but it affects much more than just that. This wobble also impacts the North African monsoon, and that, my friend, determines how much rain falls on the Sahara.
So, when the monsoon is strong,
the Sahara turns green, hence the green Sahara. But when it weakens, well, you get the picture.
we get the desert we know today. So you're saying the Sahara's climate is like this giant pendulum swinging back and forth across millennia.
Exactly. And get this, in about 15,000 years, the Sahara is projected to be green again.
That's both fascinating and, I don't know, maybe even a little hopeful. Makes our current climate anxieties seem a tad less permanent. Though I guess it also shows just how much our planet can change. Do we have any solid proof of these green Sahara periods?
Oh, absolutely. One word. Lake Megachad. During one of the wetter periods, this lake was gigantic, even larger than all the Great Lakes combined. Today, all that's left is its much smaller descendant, Lake Chad.
So it's like a little glimpse into the Sahara's watery past.
Exactly. A stark reminder of just how drastically things can change over time.
It's mind-blowing to think about those massive climate shifts, completely transforming one of the most extreme environments on Earth. Speaking of extreme, how does anything even survive out there? I'm getting hot just thinking about it.
It's brutal, no doubt. But life, as they say, finds a way. Plants and animals have developed some pretty incredible adaptations to handle the Sahara's intense heat and lack of water.
Okay, I need some specifics. Like, how do creatures cope when the sand itself can reach 80 degrees Celsius?
Well, let's start with one creature that's as cute as it is resilient, the fennec fox. You know, those adorable little guys with the comically large ears?
Oh yeah, they're practically all ears.
Exactly. And those oversized ears aren't just for show, they actually help dissipate heat, keeping the fox cool in those scorching temperatures.
Built-in air conditioning, desert style.
Precisely. Then you have the addax, a type of antelope that can survive for almost a year without drinking any water.
Wait, a year? Seriously, I get thirsty after like an hour. How is that even possible?
It gets most of the moisture it needs from the plants it eats, and its kidneys are incredibly efficient at conserving every last drop.
Talk about adaptation.
Yeah.
Any other cool examples of creatures evolving to thrive in the Sahara?
Oh, tons. Did you know there's even a special kind of cheetah that lives in the Sahara?
No way. A desert cheetah?
Yep. And unlike their savanna counterparts, the Saharan cheetah is super pale, helps them reflect sunlight and blend into that desert landscape.
So they've got, like, custom camouflage. That's incredible. What about plants? Anything tough enough to take root in that environment?
Definitely. You won't find any dense forests, but there's a surprising amount of plant life in the Sahara. Many of them grow low to the ground, hugging the earth to avoid the wind.
Makes sense.
Some store precious water in their stems, while others have incredibly long roots. I mean, we're talking deep roots, burrowing down to tap into those hidden water sources.
Wow, it's amazing what life can do when it has to.
Oh, and I almost forgot. Some plants can even go dormant during the driest periods. Basically, they hit the pause button on life until the rain returns.
The ultimate survival strategy. I'm kind of wishing I could go dormant during tax season. But all this talk of life in the Sahara makes me wonder, did people ever witness these creatures? I mean, actually live alongside them? The Sahara has a pretty long history, right?
Right on. The Sahara story goes way beyond just enduring the present. It's a place with a super rich past stretching back thousands of years. This seemingly empty landscape. It wasn't always this way. There's tons of evidence showing that entire civilizations thrived in the Sahara.
Okay, now you're speaking my language. What kind of evidence are we talking about here?
Well, we do have some physical ruins, but some of the most fascinating clues come from rock art. These ancient paintings and engravings, some dating back a staggering 10,000 years, give us a glimpse into a much wetter Sahara.
So it's like these ancient artists were leaving us messages, clues to decode about life back then.
Exactly, and the images themselves are super telling. We even see depictions of animals like crocodiles, which tells you just how different the environment must have been.
Hold up, crocodiles in the Sahara. Now that's just wild. So were there any particular civilizations that really stood out from this period?
Oh, there were quite a few. One super interesting group was the Kiffian culture. They were around 10,000 to 8,000 years ago, and based on their skeletal remains, we know they were really tall, like well over 6 feet.
Wait, giant people in the Sahara? This just keeps getting better.
And then came the Tanarian culture, known for their incredibly elaborate burial practices. Archaeologists even uncovered this triple burial, a mother and her 2 children laid to rest together, surrounded by flowers.
Oh, that's both beautiful and heartbreaking. It's easy to forget that we're talking about real people here, not just names in a history book. People who lived and loved in a place we now think of as almost impossible to survive in. Were there any other major civilizations that made the Sahara their home?
Around 500 BCE, the Garamantes came onto the scene. They were this really powerful urban civilization, and their secret was ingenuity. They developed a super sophisticated system of underground tunnels to tap into fossil water reserves.
Fossil water. You mean like water that's been trapped underground for ages?
You got it. And by accessing this hidden water source, they were able to create oases and grow crops right there in the middle of the desert.
It's like they found a cheat code for surviving in the Sahara.
They did. But their story is also kind of a cautionary tale, right? Even with all their ingenuity, the Garamantes eventually depleted those fossil water reserves. And so their civilization, which had flourished for centuries, eventually collapsed.
Man, it really makes you think, doesn't it? About the limits of natural resources, even with human ingenuity in the mix.
Yeah, and that's a question we're still grappling with today.
Totally. But the Sahara story isn't just about vanished civilizations, right? It's also about the connections forged across its sands.
Yeah, you're talking about trade routes, right?
Exactly. For centuries, the Sahara wasn't seen as this impassable barrier, but as a pathway. A place where different cultures bumped into each other, traded goods, and shared ideas.
Precisely. And this actually brings up a really interesting question.
So we've journeyed through time, explored ancient cities, and even met a desert cheetah. But where does the Sahara fit in today's world? What's its role now?
That's the thing. The Sahara isn't some relic of the past. It's woven into our modern world in some pretty surprising ways.
Oh, do tell.
For one, the Sahara is full of resources. I mean, we're talking massive oil and natural gas reserves, especially in Algeria and Libya. Then there's Morocco with those huge phosphate deposits. And phosphates, they're key for fertilizers.
Wait, so my garden variety fertilizer could have originated in the Sahara?
It's totally possible. The Sahara's got a surprisingly big role in the global economy, even agriculture.
That's wild. It really shows you how connected we are to this seemingly remote place.
Yeah.
But it also makes you think extracting resources on that scale in such a fragile environment.
Right. It's a huge question, and there are some pretty bold engineering projects trying to find that balance. One that comes to mind is Libya's great man-made river project.
Oh yeah, that massive network of underground pipelines. How's that all work again?
Remember how we talked about the Garamantes using those tunnels for fossil water? Well, this project takes it to a whole other level. Think a vast system of pipelines spanning hundreds of kilometers, drawing fossil water from deep under the desert.
So it's like the Garamontes playbook, but supersized.
You got it. The goal is to pump that ancient water to coastal cities and farmlands, basically making the desert bloom again.
That's some serious ambition. But a project this big must come with some tough questions, right?
For sure. It sparked a lot of debate about the environmental impact and how sustainable it is to use those ancient water sources.
Makes you think about the trade-offs, doesn't it? Between progress and protecting our planet. Kind of reminds me of the Garamontes, super innovative, but with a reminder that even the smartest solutions can backfire.
It's a good parallel to keep in mind. And speaking of bridging the past and present, what about actually crossing the Sahara today? Isn't there a highway that runs right through it?
Yep, the Trans-Saharan Highway. An incredibly ambitious project, meant to connect North Africa to the south. I think some parts are still under construction, though, right?
That's right. It's a massive endeavor, logistically speaking, especially given the conditions. But it really shows how driven we are to connect with each other no matter the obstacles.
It's a powerful image, that ribbon of road cutting through such an unforgiving landscape. It speaks to human resilience and our need to explore to bridge those gaps.
It does. It's easy to get caught up in the Sahara's vastness, the harsh beauty of it all. But there's so much more to it than just sand and heat.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes. We've gone from ancient civilizations to desert cheetahs to highways through the sand.
We've only scratched the surface. The Sahara is endlessly fascinating, and it's not some static thing. It's always changing, always full of surprises.
Totally. And for anyone listening, if you ever get the chance to experience the Sahara, even just through a book or documentary, go for it. You might just gain a whole new appreciation for this incredible place.
Couldn't agree more. The Sahara challenges what we think we know, sparks our curiosity, and reminds us just how powerful nature can be.
Perfectly said. Well, on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the Sahara Desert. Hope you all enjoy the journey as much as we did.
Until next time, keep exploring.